the March 6th budget committee meeting to order. Everybody's present, 4 members are present. Can we approve the agenda? Any changes?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
It's passed. Move to budget update.
Thank you, Jack. So we have a guest joining us today, Dan Navin. Is joining us to talk about the topic of natural gas purchasing. Just as a little bit of background, I've shared with this committee that one of the items of concern in this year's budget is our overall broader utility budget. And the increases that we've seen in rates on both the electrical end and the natural gas end compared to where we were in the recent past. Dan did share some information that we had included in a packet from a couple of months ago. I talked to the committee about the fact that there are a couple of different strategies that can be considered for purchasing natural gas. The committee was interested in learning a little bit more about that. So we asked if there was interest in having Dan join us. Dan works for a firm named Symmetry Energy. Symmetry allows districts that like us that use quite a bit of natural gas to purchase directly instead of purchasing through MG&E. We do have cost savings by working with Symmetry. We have purchased at what's called market rates, and Dan's going to talk about a little bit about the ways we could choose to purchase. But just as some background, that's what we currently are doing. And then Dan's going to just review the different ways that things work with them and what are some of the options to think about. And then answer any of the questions you might have. It's not an action item. We don't have to do anything today, but I think we'd be looking for just your initial reaction to what Dan is sharing. As far as if you think we should make any changes moving forward. So I'm just going to throw it over to Dan.
Thanks, Steve. So we shared some info, and so really what we do as Symmetry is we work in the deregulated world, so most of the utilities and even at home, you buy it's regulated. The supply, the transportation, everything's regulated by the PSC and through deregulation, which has been some called open access. It's been available since really the late mid 80s to early 90s. And we've been doing it for quite a while, but so what we do is we act as a supplier, so we access the deregulated rates, and then there's a cost savings versus MG&E, just from the deregulated versus regulated rates. And then what Steve is talking about and other districts work with is we can do some price budgeting or price fixing, so we can provide a fixed price for a fixed volume over a fixed term. So it helps control the cost, but also it can help manage and minimize any price spikes that happen from the winter and from what we've seen. And that's really kind of what we do. And if the narrative up there is really just different components. So like really if you're at home, and then if everyone at home, if you buy from a utility, they manage the top 3 of the commodity, the transportation, which is getting the gas from production facility up to our market, and then the utility costs, which they pay really the low pressure distribution system that moves the gas from the transmission system into your home. So if you think of the electric grid, it mirrors that. It's just all underground. And then what a marketer is what we act as. We take title to the gas, we deliver on the pipeline, we take over all the utility functions as far as the commodity and the transportation side. And then MG&E still delivers it on their low pressure system. So that's really where we fit into the natural gas world. So we're working with you on deregulated rates versus the regulated energy rates. And currently the pricing is it mirrors MG&E's prices. It's just lower, so it saves a little bit of money. And the other option we have is we can price gas. In the future for future delivery. Based on what the current rates are for gas. And that's where it provides some stability. I mean, in simple terms, when prices typically prices increase in the winter, when there's higher demand. And then you can fix pricing at any time, but let's say now for the next winter or for the next year, which then provides you a fixed price and kind of smooths pricing out and avoids any price spikes. In general, the last. I don't know if there's any questions on kind of what we do when we're just fit in. There's a question on that. And then, so right now, prices that were higher last year, a lot of it comes from its supply and demand. So with like before COVID, this is just kind of general market info. The production was growing at a faster pace than demand. And then when the economy got shut down, demand was shut off. So prices dropped really drastically, but then the production had to kind of match demand. And then the economy kind of puttered along, and when it opened up, demand really spiked up ahead of production. So we saw price increases basically from this time last year through really until probably late December, early January, just until production caught up with demand. And now prices are lower right now because there's been a lull in demand, and that's where I came to talk to Steve. Usually every once a year or twice a year, I give them calls, send them some info on pricing and where it sits. And now we're kind of looking at potentially managing that price and managing some of the volatility that we've seen over the past couple of years.
So you anticipate, production increasing?
It has been for a while.
And-
Yeah.
And it's not caught up to demand.
Production's at the highest levels we've seen. I don't know if it's ever, but it's pretty close. And demand is growing as well. It's just that right now, there's kind of a lull in demand. So prices have softened.
What factor?
Winter and weather, so main drivers of gas are gonna be weather. So the winter's been soft. LNG exports is a new, it's a big demand, new demand growth area. So, and that's been slower over really the last probably 3 to 6 months because of weather and some of the economies of the world are slower. But those are two of the main drivers, and then electricity too, demand. With the economy, our economy is strong, but in general, weather, and then with electricity, and then because there's natural gas fired electric generation, which takes up natural gas to make electricity. There's heating load. So those are two of the weather and economy dependent items, and then the LNG exports are really the big growth engine for natural gas.
So, obviously, with the Ukraine war, a lot of that LNG is going into Europe.
Yeah.
And next winter is hard. Prices should go on.
In theory, they would, right? Unless Europe comes up with another supply source, but we're their main supplier right now.
Where would the other supply source be?
In Europe, I think some Middle Eastern countries are starting to develop natural gas capabilities to export because they have a lot of natural gas reserves as well. So there's going to be other sources. Just as in general, that's the market will get filled somehow. And right now, the U.S. is, for an export standpoint, is a low cost supplier when you look at Europe, other Australia, other countries that can export gas. So in theory, your answer is yes. Prices should go higher when there's more demand.
And, so would you recommend that we lock some of this in next year?
Well, it depends on what we want to do. If we want to look at pricing gas to manage the budget. And based on history, if we look, there's some benefits to pricing gas flow our budget, so it gives us some stability. It doesn't guarantee that prices won't go lower than that price that we fix. It's just trying to manage it. So I know in the past, when Steve and I talked, the district was kind of in a growth mode. I don't know if it still is, but it was pretty, and there was always a thought that I think there was enough reserves and enough money that we didn't really need to do any price management because we could manage it within our budget. And I don't know if it's because of the price spikes or just in general, it's time to kind of maybe just to review it with a different mix of the board members to look at it. So if you want to have a price certainty and just provide some stability in your budget and really avoid some price spikes in the winter, it would be, we haven't seen prices this low for the last 2 years. So 2002 is probably the lowest, the next lowest piece time period that we've seen. So today we haven't seen prices this low for the last 2 years. And before that was like a 20-year low, was in 2002, and that was all related, though, I think more toward COVID, the forced shutdowns. So they weren't natural demand changes, they were forced by the government. So when you look at that, that's there's a lot for price certainty now is not, I mean, you never know exactly when that time is going to be, when you never hit the bottom, you never try and buy the top, but to provide some stability, that would be, it would make sense to price part of your gas if you're trying to manage it.
In the past, I brought this up with the budget committee, and the concern that the committee members had at that time was, let's just use just easy numbers. Let's say the price per therm is 0.50, just that we could buy next winter at 0.50 and we lock in half of it. But then we actually get to next winter, and for a variety of reasons, the market is selling it at 0.40. In that scenario, we have overpaid for a product, right? Because if we would have just waited, we could have bought it. However, the opposite could be true, like this winter. If you purchase it at 50 cents and a bunch of things go sideways in the market, and maybe it's actually selling at 70 cents, we would look like we're really smart because we've secured half of our gas at 50 cents and it's really 7 cents. So it really has to do with your personal philosophy on, do you believe we should seek budget certainty? You know, if we want to seek budget certainty and avoid the ups and downs that could occur as the market changes, you would seek to lock in a price that is reasonable for budget certainty. If you're more willing to allow utilities to ride up and down based on the market, then you don't really want to lock in. It just completely depends on your perspective on a topic like this.
Mark, Steve, so historically, have you tracked back a couple number of years for the historical act, what's happened? Have we seen each year it's actually gone above what we budgeted for? Where are we at with that?
Yeah, for a number of years, we've been under budget because of the record low rates that Dan was describing. We've been underneath it. Just when you look at like the 2022 up here as an example, when you look at like November and October is a good example. You look at 92 cents and you look over on the left, it was 49 cents a year before, and you go further to the left, it was probably in the 20s or 30s. So a couple of years ago, we ended up with savings on our utility budget. Now we're looking at being over quite a bit because of the fact that you've gone from, let's say, 20 cents or 30 cents to 40 cents to 90 cents. So it's been a significant change over just a couple of years. And that's why Dan's bringing up the theory of, do you want to try to just budget for something. Because we could have, if we were a district that pre-purchased. We probably would have pre-purchased this winter in the 40 to 50 cent range, I'm guessing.
It all depends on timing. But yeah, it might have been a tick higher, but it would have been. It could have been lower than what we, and a lot of districts did, and so some of the districts that we work with. A lot of them have tighter budgets, so they want to manage it that way. So then they're more concerned about budget control and making sure that they can, and then what some of the districts do is they look at. And Steve has probably done this too, they'll look at a cost savings. Some of them call it cost avoidance because you're just not paying them. And they take that money that they budgeted for and then they use it on facility projects because their budgets are tighter. So then if they can manage their budget. And then save some money, then they can do a lighting project or they can do some energy efficiency thing that. But it all, and then other districts, just. Most of them do that for just consistent pricing and then budget management is really what they're looking at it for. Because there are some months in most years, you're gonna save money on a calendar year, but there's some months in the summer where. Your volumes are lower and then sometimes the prices in the summer are lower than what your fixed price is. So if you looked at it on a monthly basis, you paid more by doing the hedging program, but overall over the year, you save money and then you've been able to take that annual cost savings and apply it to either other projects or just saying we're managing our budget versus, helps us manage the district.
So if we say, hey, we wanna hedge. Are we hedging for the year or are we hedging for the winter?
Really, it's most
We can do whatever we want.
districts do it annually, but you can do it any way you want. So I mean, you could just hedge for the winter. The prices then will be higher because the summer prices are lower. So it's really what we do is there's a price per month and a volume per month. And then if you do it for the year, you're gonna have, and then it's a weighted average cost of that. And then that's where the fixed price comes from. So if you take out the lower price months, that moves the average price higher. Yeah. So you can do it, we can do just winter, we can do summer. Some districts do, like, they don't want to make it too complicated, but you might do a 25% hedge for, let's say, the year. And then before winter, you want to make sure you're 50% hedged before you go into winter. So you're trying to take advantage of some of the costs, lower the costs in the winter, which are your higher price spots, but also gives you some flexibility if like this coming out of let's say the summer is pretty mild, like we had a mild winter and a mild summer, and let's say the forecasts are for a mild winter. Prices sometimes will just stay lower and just kind of, as long as production stays level, they'll kind of stay lower as they go. So then you have 25% hedge, but then you're buying 75% kind of on a monthly price, which will be lower than that, potentially that hedge price. So there's different strategies without getting too complex on it, but you can do, really, it's either seasonal or annual. And then you can, you just maybe do whatever you guys are comfortable with, where you can manage that budget, or Steve can manage it. And you'll be within that budget window, whether it's 50% of your gas price or 75 or whatever it is. So it's pretty, you can do it any way you want, but there's some strategies that we worked with other districts in the past that makes sense and provides, it's simple to understand, but you have to provide you some control of your gas cost.
Just think that, given the geopolitical situation out there and the likelihood that we have 2 mild winters back to back.
Never know, right? You never know.
You never know, maybe it's over something, but, let's say you do have a tough winter next year and Europe has a tough winter. The LNG is going to go into Europe, right? And even though you say that they're developing these fields east of them, that's going to take a while. Because I think it really started to have a lot, but it's going to take a while to make the operating place for.
Yeah, I don't know the construction time, but it takes time. You're building basically a big plumbing contraption that can cool natural gas down to what's it, minus 200 degrees or whatever it is, to stick it on the ship and send it away. And then you have to And then on the other side. Now, there was an issue this year, there's to be a terminal to offload it where in Europe, they were actually taking some old ships. And converting them and basically making like a temporary storage, floating storage because they didn't have enough. Capacity to unload and even store all the gas. So there's some operational challenge, but you're right, there's timing and no one knows how long really what those will take from government permitting to construction to get them done.
Would the committee like to see at the next meeting? An example of like 50% for the year, just to see what your thoughts are.
So can I just ask one question? Adam, you said it's a weighted average. It's a weighted average of like the 22 prices.
It's what the future prices look like, so.
Um,
Yeah, so we utilized, one of the things to look at is it's called the NYMEX, the New York Mercantile Exchange, the natural gas futures contract. You look at that and that gives you kind of a benchmark of where pricing is, and that's what we would use. That there's calculations that we use, but that's the benchmark for it. And then we send that stuff to Steve, and what I can do with the pricing example is show there's a little diagram that we put together that shows pricing and kind of a budget, like a reverse basketball bracket kind of setup. And then I'll put together with Steve the monthly prices. And that shows a calculation to get those numbers, to get that one number.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can see it.
So we can do that at a future meeting, have Dan come, or whether you can come back or not, but you can at least give us the documents to look at as far as what that might look like. I mean, we can do as an example, just like 50% year round, so you can see and then decide from there. That makes sense?
Makes sense.
Well, thanks for joining us, Dan.
Oh, thanks for inviting.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Dan.
Once you get to the important stuff, okay, right?
Thanks for coming.
Sure.
So the only other thing I just mentioned in there is we've talked about our utility budget and where it's trending for the year. Just an area of concern that we're keeping our eye on. And then depending on where things go next year, it's an area that we're gonna have to take a look at. That's the only item under that topic. Moving forward into 23-24 planning. The first agenda item is just a timeline of the process that we had set up for this year. We just wanted to note that the process does include for this month asking this committee to recommend approval of what we're going to talk about under item C for the next board meeting for planning purposes for this year. Ally and I wanted to talk about the state budget proposal from the governor and wanted to talk through some of the key differences between what the governor included in his budget proposal and what we've included in our planning process. And Rebecca, would you mind opening that up for a moment? And there's just a couple of items we really want to focus on. If you want to go to the next page, please. And if you want to just make it a little bit bigger. All right. That sounds great. So the third bullet point. Granting districts a sizable increase in revenue raising authority. With per pupil revenue limit increases of $350 in 23-24 and an additional $650 in 24-25, the largest per pupil adjustments since revenue limits were imposed. So the governor's proposing $1,000 over 2 years. I just want to make sure I call to your attention. That is a very significant difference than what we have in our planning process. So our budget planning process is utilizing $200 per year for each of the next 2 years. The governor is proposing $1,000. So the difference over the 2 years, just for easy math, 400 compared to 1,000. That's a $600 difference over the 2 years. And every $100 is a bit over 400,000. So you're roughly talking under that item over the 2 years, about $2.5 million. So it's very sizable. And it is significantly different than what we have in our planning process. So I just want to make everybody aware of that. And then there's a second one that is as well significantly different than what we have in there. And that is special education aid. And I just want to point out that first bullet point. Providing more than $1 billion investment in special ed aid, reaching 60% in both years of the biennium, and going beyond his fall proposal, and this is referencing what the governor had suggested in the fall, with a historic and critical investment over each of the 2 years. So back in the fall, the governor was suggesting going from 30% to 45%, and then 45% to 60%. Now, the governor's proposing going right to 60%. In our case, we're at about $2.4 million in special ed categorical aid for 30%. So doubling it is another probably 2.4 million per year for each of the next 2 years. So just to put it in perspective, the governor's budget is well in excess of $5 million in additional resources for our district than what is in our budget planning document. So very significant differences between the two. Now, depending on your perspective on this entire process, as soon as the governor was done sharing his budget proposal, the party in charge of the Wisconsin legislature said, we're scrapping this entire thing and we're starting over. So I'm not sure how much time we would want to spend on something that we have been told publicly is being scrapped. And the Republicans are intending to start over. And they are looking at a budget that has a significant focus on flat tax and moving to that over a couple of state budgets. The difference with this state budget, though, compared to the last one, the governor felt that he couldn't veto it because of all of the federal money that was included in that budget and the need to approve it so that that money would come to schools. That's not the case this time. So there isn't veto proof authority in the Wisconsin legislature anymore. So it's clear that there has to be some willingness for people to work together. The question is, what do you believe that willingness to work together is going to look like for public schools? I'm bringing this up because at the March board meeting, we're going to ask the board to approve a planning process. You as board members may be asked by folks, why is our planning process so different than this? And if you think our budget planning process is too far off from what you believe might happen, we should probably modify it for our process that we're going to go through this spring. But I just wanted to call to your attention because I think members of the public will probably ask. This is the biggest difference I've ever seen between what we're planning for and what a governor has proposed. It just completely depends on your perspective of what's going to happen over the next couple of months. But there are huge differences between our budget planning process and this.
Steve, given some of the rhetoric that's been in the papers at least, do you conceive a scenario where the legislature targets where they put the money versus allocating it to a per pupil increase? And if so, would those targeted increases allow us to budget according to this $200 per year plan, so that we could reallocate funds?
I would see, Mark, in the end, there being common agreement that some kind of an increase in the revenue limit per student is necessary after 2 previous years of 0. I do think 200 is a reasonable assumption. 200 has been used in the past as a amount that had support across the political spectrum. I could see a combination where we may be more in that range, but the special ed investment might be the one where you could see it going significantly beyond what we have in our planning, which was only 5% over 2 years. So I do expect there to be some base increase. But my guess is the area that we will probably in the end see quite a bit of a difference is probably special ed.
Steve, back to the page before this, after there's a mention of the 350 for next year and
Yep.
650. There's a phrase, a low revenue ceiling increase. What does that reference?
Sure, that's a great question. So in the revenue limit formula, there are districts that their total amount, so after you would add like the 350, let's just say a district is spending 9,000, and then the 350 would allow them to spend 9,350. There is what's called a low revenue ceiling, and I'm not sure off the top of my head what it is, but let's just say it's 10,000. That would allow a district to go up to that 10,000 at one shot, because they're spending below, significantly below where everyone else is. That's even though we're about an average spending district,
Yeah, I wondered.
that's not gonna be a factor for us. But for those districts that are in that range, that's very helpful to them.
I tend to agree with you. I think per pupil. I think this is great that he's proposing, but I don't think it's gonna get there. You know, if you remember the last budget, or at least the budget before, you know, we had bipartisan support on special ed. We need to increase that, which I think we got is
Up to 30.
So I would suspect that, you know, you'd be ratcheting that up. I'm not sure it's gonna go up to the proposed amount, but then maybe if you look at it somewhere in between, you know, that might be the way, but I think from a budgeting standpoint, if you at least stay where we're at.
What special ed budgeting did you use 35?
We went from 30 to 35% over
In our-
2 years in our planning process, which is a positive additional source of funding. I feel like where we're at is reasonable until we have some further indication from the legislative process that different numbers are being proposed. But I think the most important thing is you will likely be approached by folks asking, you know, what do you think about the governor's budget? What are we planning here locally? Why is there such a difference? Another question that I would expect you will start hearing from some community members is, Are you planning to use the referendum to exceed the cap that was approved last November? If something like this is being proposed? And I think that's a valid question that we would have to have that discussion on if something like this happened. But you may be approached with that, because obviously when we constructed that question, it was not based on this type of an investment in schools. So that might be another thing that a community member might approach you with is, well, if this happens, what would the board do with that exceed the cap question that the public approved? And so where we're at right now is we're utilizing those funds and we're only utilizing $200 and 35%. In the event that something like this would happen, or to your point, Jack, something in between, Ally and I would bring in the new calculations, and ultimately this committee and then the board would have to weigh in on where do you see this going? But I just wanted to have a discussion to make sure everyone is aware. And if you felt like Ally and I should change the process that we've created, we'd be happy to do it. But just wanted to call that to your attention.
You know, I agree with Jack. I think we stay the course for now until we know more.
You agree, Mark?
Sounds good.
Okay, so then the next agenda item is our budget planning process. And just to share with you, you've seen this twice already. So our timeline just asks for a recommendation to bring this forward to the full board for approval. We talked about the $200 in each year for the revenue limit, going to 35% for special education aid. The feedback that the board had was the position at Prairie Elementary School being added in. Other than that, there's no changes that the administrative team is recommending. And we're just looking for the board, this committee, to recommend approval at the next meeting.
Steve, just to be sure, within that budget, it looks like Arboretum at 2 grade levels will be full before any new enrollment starts, so.
Do you want to pull that up, Rebecca? We can look at the page you're talking about.
It's page. Down in page 11, 10. So it looks like Arboretum at grade 2 and grade 4 are at 22 average class size in the budget now. So that's already secured kids in those classes, and those are, well, is 4th grade up to 24 kids?
Up to 25.
And what
and
about
Optimal's
2nd grade?
23. Second grade's 22.
2nd grade would be full when, so any new move-in 2nd grade would be not accepted at our move-in, is that right?
So these are the projections. I would need to just go back and look and see where we're at today, which is a couple slides back. Rebecca, would you, or a couple pages back? You might just going back a couple pages to where we are right now. You can stop right there. So no, I'm sorry, that's not by grade. So I'll go back a little further. It's not by school on there. We keep going. Right there. So right now, yes, that's correct.
First
We're at
grade.
22 in 1st grade at Arboretum. Yes, currently that's where we're at.
And that will be okay.
In the past, when this has happened, we have transferred families to the schools. So in this case, we're adding a teacher. Well, no, that'd be 1st grade. Whatever grade between Heritage and Prairie has the lowest class size.
Yeah, and
we
there are,
remove.
yeah, there's room at Heritage, so that would be the message that we,
And then just so you know, we then do open it back up when we go to third grade because class size goes up and Julie reaches back out and asks if they'd like to return to Arboretum. And in most cases, the answer is no. Once we do that, but yes, we do then offer that to folks when we go into third grade. But yep, that's correct.
all right. Thank you.
Any other questions? You need a motion,
Motion to approve.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
So the next agenda item is just mirroring an agenda item on the HR committee that's meeting this week. This is a reminder that the board saw at the last meeting. Information that Brian put in the packet on health insurance options for 23-24. The additional investment in the plan is approximately 3%. The board has also previously approved a new wellness tier that our staff is going through right now. So it just depends on how many people participate in that. And Brian's here if you wanted to add anything. Otherwise, I just wanted to keep this on everyone's radar. That the HR committee will look at it this week. The 3% is included in the budget planning process. And then the board meeting next Monday, Brian will present a series of employee benefit programs for effective July 1st. Sure.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add to that is, the board has seen the health insurance plan, which is obviously the most significant of all the benefits that we offer. The insurance committee is going to meet today to review some potential changes to our dental plan, which is self-funded, and increasing some of the benefits to that because our balance continues to increase. Also looking at voluntary vision plan and excuse me, some potential changes there, which should increase the benefit levels to employees that choose to participate. And the third type of insurance that we offer is currently not escaping my mind. So we got dental health. Yeah, thank you. Our term life policy as well. And then all of those will be reviewed today by insurance committee for a recommendation to go to the HR committee on Wednesday morning, and then to the full board for your review on the following Monday.
So why does the if it's a self-funded plan, we're obviously putting some money there. If we put money there, we can't take it out, right? Is there like an account? So why would it continue to balance?
Sure. I think one of the things that automatically caused our expenditures or our claims to go down was COVID. There was that period of time where, in essence, they weren't, there were no appointments except for maybe emergency procedures. That really kind of increased the number of our balance that was in there. And then what we found afterwards is that the claims have just been going at a rate lower than what is expected. And in addition, the plan structure is set up so that we're at about a 95% medical claims ratio. So by its very design, we're about approximately 5% every year. What we're taking in is and what we're spending is a difference of 5% in the favor of a balanced growth. In terms of what has happened since then, what we've seen is that we have more participants because our staff has increased, and the expenditures coming out, claims coming out, just haven't kind of kept pace. And so we've gotten to the point now where our balance, like when I looked at it last week, We were at 578,000 in the account, and if you kind of look, if you just track what has typically happened, we'll probably get to about 600,000 by end of claim year, June 30th. And so, I mean, that's a larger balance than really what the insurance committee had ever, and HR committee and board had ever thought would be there. And so what we're looking at is just increasing some benefits to work in concert with the health plan, which is going to cost some employees more. We offer some more benefits in the health plan that will offset some of those costs. And we're also looking to be still conservative and not eat up that balance. What we would propose is looking at about 10 years for it to kind of pare that balance down. So plenty of time for us to make adjustments in between now and then without having to make contribution changes by employees of the district. In terms of the other question though, you'd asked about once money goes in, I really would need to defer to Steve and Allie to ask that question or answer that question.
The funds are kept in the district, so there isn't like a third party that's managing it for us. So it's all in district funds.
So is that, Ken?
Yep, yep.
So then, so you could change that formula so that it doesn't.
Yes, the board has the authority to do either what Brian was describing or other strategies like pause contributions. There's a variety of strategies the board would be able to decide because it's all held within our funds in the district within fund time.
Brian, what is the ideal balance for that fund?
That's a great question, Mark. And what I would say is, I think you would, as you would all know, as part of the budget committee, I think it's important for us to always have a balance there in case, because it is a month-to-month bill. And certainly as you look at the trend of a year, there are certain months that we are absolutely historically always going to spend the most. Those tend to happen, right around the same time when medical best flex plans need to be expended. That's usually a big month. So January is typically we get a large bill from what happened in December. We tend to see pretty large bills in the summer months, early in the summer or right before school starts. Everybody tries to get their appointments in at those times and those actions. What is a healthy balance? I think the part of it is I would say we want to have a safe, I would personally feel comfortable with a couple months of expenditures typically there. But I would say that is really a question for the board to consider what is a healthy balance. And so when I say a couple months, and we tend to spend about 60,000, give or take a little bit per month on medical claims, the administrative, because we have an administrator, Delta Dental, that helps process. They process for us and then we pay them for what we spend. So it's about 60,000 per month. It is kind of what expenditures are. So we have quite a bit more than that at this point. But the benefit to that is that we can make some adjustments, have a real large safety net, see how those benefits play out over a plan year, and then make adjustments to them.
Any other questions? Comments, concerns?
If not, we'll move on to the next item. And then we'll just close out the meeting with this. So Randy and I had a chance to talk with Jack about this topic, and we've included it on the agenda for both the facility committee and the budget committee this week. And this topic really is around district-wide maintenance planning and how the board would like to see maintenance requests be funded during a period of time where we have referendum funds available. So just to define the terms, the referendum is going to be in what's called Fund 49. So when you start seeing Ally and I put together the budget drafts, you will see a Fund 49 page now. And that will reference the referendum related funds. And then also you'll see us reference Fund 10. We will stop referencing Fund 41 as we move forward because the facility committee has approved the remaining use of those dollars. So we're down to looking at Fund 10 or Fund 49. In Fund 10, last year, this committee asked us to set aside $300,000 per year for future maintenance projects in our fund balance. So we did that last year. The board approved that last September, and those funds are sitting there. We also have the ability through Fund 49 as the referendum question referenced district-wide maintenance and district-wide maintenance projects. So as a board, you have two opportunities to decide which fund you would want to use for maintenance projects. We could use Fund 10, we could use Fund 49. There could be an argument made to building up a balance for maintenance within Fund 10 over the next 5 years while referendum funds remain available. That could get it to about $1.8 million by the time the referendum funds would be utilized, which would then provide the district with a funding mechanism for continued maintenance work moving forward. If the committees like that approach, we would have those funds just sit. And when John Kramer creates a project list, they would be presented to the facility committee with the thought process that we would utilize district-wide maintenance authority under the referendum to fund those projects. Of course, it could be done the complete opposite way, which would be there was 300,000 saved by last June. There'll be another 300,000 saved by this June. We could go into the budget planning process for next year and ask John to put together projects that would come out of Fund 10 and not touch Fund 49. So I want to just let Jack share your thoughts because we had a chance to talk about this and then open it up for thoughts from the committee.
Well, I think when you look at it, you've got those dollars in the referendum that have to go to either maintenance or building. So you might as well use those there. And I think when you look at building up the reserve over time, now if you have a parking lot or a roof or, a boiler, whatever, that are major expenditures, you got the money to maintain them. So it just makes sense to take it, or at least in my mind, it makes sense to take it out of the referendum dollar.
So is this above and beyond our normal yearly maintenance budgeting expenses?
Yeah, great question. So what this would be is the capital maintenance list that John historically presents the facility committee in the spring. It tends to be in the neighborhood of like $500,000. It has been funded in the recent past out of Fund 41. But the board's intent was to shift that 300,000 into Fund 10 and to hold it there. So it would be similar, Mark, to what has been done historically. Probably $500,000 worth of work. And the philosophical question is, does that get lined up with Fund 10 or Fund 49?
And so then. When we. Came up with the number for the operational expense. How much of that did we envision going towards that project list?
Are you talking about the referendum list?
Right.
So the referendum has, I'm gonna call it, multiple opportunities to fund the maintenance list and to go much deeper in the list that's currently there. So there's $6 million that's been set aside for district-wide maintenance so far. There will be interest earnings that are going to come in throughout the length of the project, which this committee has seen round one of that being at 4.4 million. So there's only two things those funds could be spent on: projects or lowering the tax levy, or both. So there's going to be that discussion. In addition to that, during the month of June or July, the facility committee will weigh in on how much contingency to keep at Heritage once all those bids are done. The remaining funds can be redirected to maintenance. And then approximately the middle of next year, the same thing will happen at the middle school. So we will be able to go deeper and deeper into that maintenance list. And or this committee will be able to have conversations about managing the property tax levy. I've stated I envision us probably doing both. Going further on that maintenance list, but also allowing this committee to manage the property tax levy in a manner that you see fit. We definitely will have the ability, based on the information that we have today, to do both of those things.
See,
Go ahead.
the $300 that you're referencing here is really the $300 in the operational referendum from 2014 that was always earmarked for maintenance.
Yep.
I think what Mark was referencing, do we have anything earmarked in our new operational referendum that is specifically targeted for maintenance, or we have not really taken those monies, $1 million this year and 2 million next year? We haven't really identified any pocket of need for those monies yet.
When we described that question to the public, we shared it as a combination between operational expenses for the new schools and investments in salary for staff. And what was the third thing?
Programming.
Yeah, programming.
So not necessarily.
Not maintenance.
Okay.
No, not maintenance.
Quite confused,
Yeah.
but I thought
Yeah.
you were referencing
Yeah.
the new operational money, so.
So I would agree with Jack that at this point, this money, I think it makes a lot of sense to build that fund up, because we have so many other space or places that we're going to get referendum money, or we're going to get monies into that maintenance need. So I agree, let's build this up with that $300 over the course of this time. That makes sense.
So is there a reason why go to Fund 49 with it versus Fund? No, we're saving it in Fund 10.
Yeah.
We don't want it in 41 anymore, because that was our, that was the problem with the whole rating issue.
Right, so where is,
So what we did is took it out of 41.
right, no, that piece, like, yeah, but when we
And
talk
put it in
about,
10.
but when we talk about going to 49. What's funding that?
The referendum.
The
The
referendum.
referendum.
The current, the
Yeah.
new referendum.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the referendum.
That's our capital
Yeah.
referendum.
Right,
Yep, and so that has to be separated out into a different fund number that the DPI calls 49.
Okay, but I thought we just said that that money is earmarked for non-maintenance issues.
That's the operations.
You got two operational questions, one for the building and maintenance and one for operations. What we're doing is taking.
No, we have two referendum questions,
Right,
but the
one
operational,
capital and one operational.
the capital is 49.
This builds the schools and does the maintenance.
Okay,
So that's what 49 is. That's the one that we bond for.
so that there's about. Was it 6 million in the capital?
6 million.
Or is that knock list that we have, not knock list, but
Right, yes.
maintenance list we have?
Exactly, that's
Okay.
correct, yep, there's a
Yeah.
6
Okay.
million.
Interest that you receive on those funds.
All right. Yeah, I agree then with the concept.
Yeah, and I think the one thing just to keep in mind for any public discussion is. We clearly have that long-term goal of consistency in school taxes for individuals. We need to see how the state budget plays itself out. But the long-term goal would be to, if necessary, utilize some of those interest earnings and the state budget process to manage the property tax levy. So using Fund 49 for maintenance projects does not mean in any scenario that that tax levy management is not also important, because we can accomplish both. And that's all I got.
Okay, good.
Motion to adjourn,
Yes, motion to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
All right, thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
I think we're staying.